Hello everyone, my name is Kirk and I'm here to refute Andres' claim that there are other forms of intelligent life beyond our planet. And he makes three claims: that there is a strong mathematical probability of life in the universe, the discovery of water on other planets increases the likelihood of life elsewhere, and that experiments with bacteria suggest the possibility of life in space is greater. I'm here today to say that the evidence that he uses to back up these claims are both insufficient and misleading. First, the response of the mathematical probability of life in the universe, such as his claim that, well, not claim, the evidence that there is over 100,000 different galaxies in the universe, so there must be life in those galaxies, but math can only explain so much. For example, in 1978, the mathematician Kirk came up with a mathematical equation that states that there is no greater power than God that can be conceived. And if he or she is believed as a concept, then he or she can exist. Mathematics alone can prove that God exists, which just goes the same for life outside our planet Earth. And keep in mind that the universe itself is inherently infinite. No amount of mathematics or calculations can even come close to calculating the 1/1 billionth of the vastness of the universe, and trying to do so, at least as I see it, is a bit, in hindsight, meaningless. In his second response, the discovery of water on other planets increases the likeliness of life elsewhere. I want to focus on his example of using Europa, that the icy surface of Europa infers that there must be life within the icy ocean underneath it, if there even is an ocean, which is pure speculation, because there's only photo evidence of the icy surface of Europa, but there's no evidence of anything being underneath it as of yet. And also, last time I checked, Europa is a moon, not a planet. Trying to apply a moon to saying that there's evidence on other planets seems insufficient. And speaking of moons, did you know that our own moon has water? Back in 2006, back in April, NASA sent the LCROSS, the Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite, into one of the moon's craters that were in its permanently shadowed region, the area around the moon's poles that is permanently in shadows, where no sunlight can reach it. It was there in that crater that water was discovered. Three sources of water, actually. There was water within its surface. There was water because of the mixture of oxygen particles on the surface of the moon and hydrogen from the solar air given to it by the sun. And there was even ice discovered in the craters within the moon's permanently shadowed regions around its poles. Now, going by Andres' logic, a satellite with no atmosphere to protect itself from meteoroids or the UV radiation from the sun can support life. I see that as quite nonsensical. And on to his third claim, that experience with bacteria suggests the possibility of life in space is greater. He supports this with his talk of NASA sending 48 strains of bacteria to the International Space Station, where they grew at a similar rate as they did down on Earth. However, looking at the same article, bacteria found to thrive better in space than on Earth, he fails to mention that the bacteria that was sent to the International Space Station was grown in an environment that was warm and oxygen-rich, much like Earth within its atmosphere. Dr. David Coyle says it best, who is a microbiologist and the lead author on the study. The warm, humid, oxygen-rich environment of the International Space Station is a far cry from the vacuum of space. So, with all that being said, what can be taken away is that there might be a possibility of life outside space. I'm not going to refute that, but as of yet, with the mathematics and science, we can only prove the possibility of life in space, but as of yet, nothing more. Thank you.
You have an outline for me?
Oh, yeah, here.
Thank you. All right, the structural stuff is fine at the beginning. I think you've got an interesting argument about the mathematical issue, given you know, the one study mathematically that tried to establish the concept of God as being legitimate. I think you've got an interesting analogy that you're making there. I think there's also a good point about the idea of infinity. The notion, for instance, that I think this is the place where you want to make that argument that you're making at the end. And I'm not denying the possibility of life in space, because I couldn't do that any more than he can say there is life in space, because we have so much territory that we have no idea what the heck is going on. So I think that argument might have fit a little bit better at that particular point. I thought your explanation about the water issue was really solid on the second point. When you use the moon as an illustration, you say the presence of water doesn't necessarily mean, you know, these sorts of things, and you've got a couple of good examples. I think you needed to give us a source on that. I'm sure that you had one, but you didn't really present it. The same sort of criticism about the information about ice and the potential ocean on Europa. We should get a source on that. I do think that you have a reasonable challenge here to suggest that there is a difference between the planets and the moons, but I think you ought to be explaining that difference, whether it has to do with their rotation, the effect of the other planet, you know, the fact that they have broken off from something else, or they are subject to other forces. I'm not exactly sure why life could not appear on a moon, much less a planet. I guess his argument is that it has to be on a planet, but I don't remember him saying that specifically. So I think that that's a good press, but I'm not sure it's a convincing one. On the bacteria issue, I think the best part that you have here is that the person who did the research that he's talking about says there's a big difference between growing something on the space station with the bacteria and growing something in the cold vacuum of space, and they are not the same. That's, I think, the most clear and direct argument on that point. All right, thank you.